Alright, hello and welcome to this video series where I will be talking about how I use programming to get better on the drums pretty much and also make my practice routines more efficient and fresh, etc. I think these videos will be enjoyable and helpful both for musicians and programmers because half of the video will be about music, the other half will be about programming. Um, uh, and also, I want to say that what I will be talking about in these videos is not specific for the drums. I use it for the drums, but I think it can be applicable to any instrument. All right, nice. So in today's video, I will be talking about how you can use music motifs, so specific and small sequences of notes, and combine them randomly to create an improvisation routine for your practice. So before we get into this concept, let me first tell you what you will need to follow this video. You will only need very basic knowledge of how MIDI works, but only very standard stuff. Everything else is self-explanatory. You will also need to have installed the Julia programming language version 0.7 or greater. The package for the Julia language called Music Manipulations version 0.1 or greater, and the software MuseScore version 2.3 or greater. And everything that I list here is free, open sourced. You can just download it and install it. All right, now let's get into it. So we have these sequences of notes that you can see on the bottom right corner of the screen. And at least for the drum sets, the top E note means that I should play it with my right hand, like this. And the low A note means that I should play it with my left hand. All right? So this gives me some sequences, and now the idea is that you can take random samples from these sequences and combine them to form a longer sequence. What do I mean by that? Let's say that we want to fill one bar of music with these sequences. Well, this can be easily done. For example, I could choose to play 5A and then 5A and then 3 and then 3. This would give me a total of 16 notes, which is one bar. So I will play this now on the drum set as an example. All right. And of course, there are other ways you could make sequences. For example, I could choose 5B and then 4 and then 4 again and then 3. So I will play this as well. All right. So first of all, notice that some of these motifs, for specifically 5B and 4, require me to alternate my leading hand as I play them one after the other. This will be important later on. But for now, what I wanted to do was to have these random collections, random sequences of motifs, but that they last longer. So I was practicing to play these kind of sequences, but that they cover 2 bars or 4 bars. And my difficulty was that I could not improvise on the fly and come up with new patterns such that I fill 4 bars. That was difficult for me. So this is where programming comes in, because I came up with a way to produce these random sequences, print them, and then study them, and this made everything easier for me. All right, I'm now going to show you how you can define these concepts at your computer using the programming language Julia, and then later on how you can combine random sequences of them. So the first thing I have to do, by the way, this is called Atom. This is the editor I use to program, and of course it's also free. So the first thing I will do is load the package Music Manipulations, because this has all the names we will need later on. And then define some basic stuff, like for example the ticks per quarter note we will be using, and the duration of a 16th note, which is of course 1/4 of the ticks per quarter note. Then, because I will be writing some music notes in Julia, I have to find the correct value for the pitch of the notes. And this is easy because I can use the function name to pitch that, given the name of the note, gives me the correct pitch value. For example, this high E that corresponded to this note over here, is actually has pitch 76. All right, then I go on and actually define these notes. So here I use this note structure, and the note structure has the following format. You give it a pitch, you give it an intensity, second argument, you give it a position in time, and you give it a duration. And this makes a note. So let me actually simply copy paste this here on the REPL. And this created the note E6 that has this intensity, also called velocity, and etc. So if I create a vector of these notes, which is this motif actually, what I have done is within Julia I have created this structure over here. You see this motif 5A is exactly this one. As you can see, you have a note E6, then A5, E6, A5, A5. All right, so let me clean this up. And of course you can do the same with every other motif. You can define the motif 5B, which is what I do here. Let me bring this up again. So here is 5B, and here is its representation within Julia. Clean this up, and you can do, of course, the same with all the other motifs. Of course, the code I have on this video, I will have a link of where you can find this code at the video description. So carrying on, I have created these 4 basic vectors of notes, all right? Now the thing is, if I want to actually use this vector of notes, I cannot leave them as they are, but I have to put them in a special struct called notes. And this special struct, the only thing it does, it takes a vector of notes and it combines it with the ticks per quarter note, which is very important if you want to export MIDI stuff. So this is what I do here. I say, all right, you know what? Take all these vectors of notes, make them the structured notes, and this is what I call motifs, all right? So motifs is simply a container of various note structures, which I will use in the next section. All right, excellent. So now that we defined this motif container, which has various sequences, we want to use the function random notes sequence. This function takes a container of nodes of this structure and combines random combination of these node sequences so that they fill up a specified length. This specified length is Q. So what I do here is I define Q to be 32 quarter notes, which is 8 bars. And then by calling this function, it picks random sequences from this pool of motifs and checks and makes sure that the final sequence has length exactly Q. Because this is important for music. If you want to have this sequence, you want it to be exactly 4 bars or exactly 8 bars. But if it's 7.5, then it doesn't make sense. So I will run this code block now. And so this function took the motifs pool and created a sequence of random nodes. All right? Sorry, not random nodes, random sequences of nodes. And then after I have these nodes here in Julia, I can first of all change directory and go to my desktop. And then I can call the function write MIDI file. And let's say test.mid and nodes. So I can write these nodes directly into a MIDI file. All right? So if I go to my desktop, here is the MIDI file. And here is where MuseScore, the software MuseScore, comes into play. This is a music score editor. And what I can do, I can simply drag and drop this MIDI file over here, and it immediately visualizes the notes for me. All right? And that is excellent. So I have this sequence of these 4 basic motifs 5A, 5B, 4, and 3. And they are combined randomly here. But there is a problem. Remember I said that some of these motifs require me to swap my leading hand. So if I start with my right hand, then I have to swap and play with my left hand. And this is something that has not been respected by this random sequence of notes. So what I'm going to do in the next part is use some very basic programming to swap the sequences that are necessary to be swapped. To do this swapping is very easy because the function random note sequence also returns you the actual motifs that it used to create the random nodes. So for example, this sec object is simply a vector of indices that simply tells me, you know what? To create this sequence of nodes, I used the second motif, then the fourth motif, then the first, etc. So the only thing I have to do is define some kind of metadata that tells me whether I should swap my leading hand or not after I have played this motif. In addition, to showcase how nice it is to work with MIDI data in Julia, I will also give titles in my music score via lyrics. So what I do here is the first entry of each of these tuples will be a title for my music score, and the second entry tells me whether I should swap hands. So this is what I do, and I put all of this kind of metadata into a container. All right, that's it. Then I define a function called inverse that says, you know what? If you give me a note, I will inverse it. So if it's played with the right hand, I will make it with the left, and if it's played with the left hand, I will make it with the right. And then I define one more function that, given this string 4, 3, 5, or etc., simply gives me the length of the string, gives me the integer. All right? And I initialize an empty MIDI track, because this is where I put the lyrics and the notes together, and simply some counter-like variables. This variable tells me whether at the moment I'm leading with my right hand or not, because if not, I have to swap notes. And this is simply the counter of the length of the notes. So here is the loop that does everything. What I do is I start and I take the index of the sequence. So the first I will be 5 in this case, all right? And then I say, okay, what is the string of the accents? In this first example, it would be 5B. So this S would be 5B. And then I say to Julia, you know what? Make a text event. A text event is a special kind of MIDI event where you can put it into your MIDI file, and then when you load it into MuseScore, it will actually write this text as a lyric. So what I say is I say make a text event out of this string, which is 5B in this case, and then add this event to the track. And then I say if at the moment I'm not leading with my right hand, then I have to swap all nodes. So this is what I do here. I simply find out the lengths I should swap, and I inverse these nodes. And then I simply add to my counter and also configure whether I should change my leading hand. This is what these two lines do. All right. I take the second entry of my metadata tuple, so this entry false or true, and using a simple XOR command, I did use whether I should swap hands. So after I have made all this swapping in my notes, I add this as well to my empty track that now has the lyrics as well, and I print them. So let me run this code block, and this is how it looks like. So of course, you cannot tell how it looks like simply from this one. What I have to do is I write a MIDI file again, but now this time I will actually have to create a new MIDI file of format 0 and TBQ and track. And I'll save this one as correct. Here we have to save this track formally as a MIDI file because we also have these lyric events that we need to export as well. Of course, I forgot a thing. Alright, so I go back to my desktop, I have this correct file, and now I drag and drop it into MuseScore. And this is how it looks like. Alright, nice. So as you can see now, this functionality properly respects the fact that, for example, after 5B, I have to start leading with my left hand, which is exactly what happens here. And after 4, I also have to change my leading hand, which is exactly what happens. And you can also see that the pattern titles are printed in the correct spots, which is what this big for loop did. All right. So now the plan is very simple. I simply run this piece of code, let's say 4 times, and I save the MIDI file and put it into MuseScore, and then I simply print it. And then I can study all these much longer sequences, and then it will be much easier for me to be able to improvise based on these motifs, because I will have already studied much longer sequences. And after I'm done studying, I will also play a couple of examples of the drum sets, so you can also see the results.
6.5 hours later.
So I have been studying for quite some time now. Yeah, it's already pretty late. And so I will play the pattern that you see on the bottom right corner. It's one of the many patterns I printed. I will try to play it once at 90 BPM, which is quite slow, and then I will try again at 130 BPM. All right. So I totally did not record this a million times until I got it right. Totally not. Anyway, before I close this video, I just want to show that this concept is generally applicable, and it doesn't have to be specific on the drums or anything. So what I will do now, instead of playing everything on my snare drum, I will move my right hand on the hi-hat, and at all the accents, I will also play with my bass drum. All right? The left hand will stay on the snare drum. So I will play 4 bars of groove, and then each one of these 4-bar long sequences.